Hey everybody, welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be talking about the Pompeii Effect. Now I'm excited to share some of this information today because it ties into a lot of the things that I've been talking about with regards to a destructive event potentially associated with the early colonial period. This article in particular, it was talking about this muddy legacy associated with the eastern United States, and just a few sentences from the article. Centuries ago, parts of the eastern United States were drowned in mud. And really interesting to me anyway, because these two scientists showed how centuries old mud has smothered many US streams. Now we're going to get into that, but just quick recap. I've been looking at a lot of these early colonial periods in North America primarily and Australia. And you had the Dutch settlement. New York City was once New Amsterdam. And at the end of the day, a lot of these sites are buried under a lot of sediment. And we're given different narratives as to why that is. In this case, I think they were trying to reclaim land. So this particular wall was buried 10 feet underneath present-day Battery Park. And then, of course, you got places like Charleston in South Carolina. And the early colonial period, it was this walled city, and we're told that they were intentionally raised, and then the more historical structures were built on top. But at the end of the day, it's largely buried, and you can still find parts of the wall that extend below the current grade. 8.5 feet. So the end result is the same. There's a lot of sediment, a lot of buried sites. So getting back to this article, they were just talking about this paper, these two scientists in 2008, how you have original streams that are now buried beneath millions of tons of what they're referring to as legacy sediment that was released by the colonial era, farming and logging, and then trapped behind countless dams. So this particular image, you have this dark organic layer, and they're associating that with the original sediment layer. But everything above that is this, what they're calling legacy sediment, which was associated with this early colonial period. So all this, they're associating it with soil erosion because of the activities of the people during these early colonial periods. And it just ties right in to what I've been saying. Now they're blaming it on soil erosion, but I think it was some event. And you have mention of meters of mud had buried the rich black soil that typified Big Spring Run before the Europeans arrived. Yeah, just really fascinating. Here's just some images from some different sites. I believe the image on the left is a village in Maryland called the Western Run. And as you can see, well over 6 feet of sediment, but there's trees, all this sediment. I don't know how far that extends, but you get all this accumulation of sediment. And they go on to mention in this article that it was a rapid accumulation of sediment. We're talking, I don't know how many thousands upon thousands of tons. And this is spread throughout the eastern United States. And basically, they created a new grade, new ground level, and there's trees growing up here. But prior to the colonists showing up, it would have been way down here. So is it really just rapid soil erosion due to agriculture and deforestation? I don't think so. I think it was some event. But just showing you some more of these sites, Indian Creek in Maryland, just unbelievable the amount of sediment that's accumulated. And now you have the new wilderness forests growing on top of all this deposited sediment, and it's all associated with this early colonial periods. And again, going back to Western Run in Maryland, there's trees, and this is the new ground level, but in essence, and this is what we see at a lot of different sites. They're buried under all this sediment. And this is Raleigh, North Carolina, I believe. And you got all these trees up here, and this is this legacy sediment. But part of the reason that we're given as the blame goes to not only agriculture and deforestation, but they blame a lot of these water mills. And this article just goes on to mention the legacy sediments. They overlay a thin veneer of organic rich sediments and tree stumps, some cut, which yield late 17th century and older ages. So below all this sediment, they find tree stumps as well. Some of them are cut, but that's another thing that we always talk about. It seems like a lot of the trees are gone, and a lot of the trees that we see are new growth trees. They're typically less than 300 years old. So this would go a long way to explaining that phenomenon as well. And I just wasn't aware of the sheer amount of these water mills, and a lot of them would have dams associated with them. And this is just a mill density 1840 US Census. And this looks like most of the eastern United States, but they give a number of up to 65,000 water-powered mills. So it's this early industrial period as well. That's what I've been noticing. And here's a Thomas Jefferson quote: "There is no neighborhood in any part of the United States without a water grist mill." And you could see, especially like the Northeast seems to be really peppered with these water-powered mills. But there's going to be more videos associated with this. I just wanted to introduce you guys to this. So I guess what I've been speculating is just there's all this sediment that I think it came during an event. I don't know when exactly that was. I don't trust their dating that they're giving us, but I don't know how it happened. But we can tie it to these mills because the sediment is trapped behind a lot of these mills and the dams. So we can associate it with the mills and the dams. But as far as what the actual date of those dams and mills are, that's anybody's guess. I think they're older than they're telling us. But yeah, just really interesting. And there was another article talking about below some of this legacy sediment brought on by the colonials. They did some studies on some of these buried leaves. And we're going to get into that. But these leaves they found underneath this legacy sediment in Pennsylvania, behind mill dams in Pennsylvania. And they're talking about how all these mill dams were built from the late 1600s to the late 1800s. But they go on to mention in this article, this professor of geosciences, we can't get information from historic records on what the area looked like before the dams. So no historic records on what was going on before, because recording of natural history didn't really begin until the 1730s and was not detailed. So again, there's tons of these dams and these mills, but not a lot of history associated with them. So underneath a lot of this legacy sediment, they found these leaves, and they studied them to try and determine what did the area look like prior to all the rapid deposition of all this sediment. And yeah, I just wanted to mention, if I didn't mention that, what you find over and over again is that now they're saying, yeah, the sediment was quickly deposited and it covered, in this case, this layer. They found these leaves. But yeah, that's a key point. The sediment was deposited quickly. So they found a lot of these different types of leaves. And so they have a picture of what type of trees were growing in that area. But yeah, just really, really interesting. And the actual cause, though, I don't know what that is. I don't think it's just all soil erosion. In a couple of articles, they were just talking about how these mill dams are very important in understanding sediment in some watersheds, but they're not necessarily the causative factor everywhere. And other research noted had found that legacy sediment had piled up even along river reaches that didn't have dams. So they find this sediment everywhere, even in locations without dams. So the dams are good though, because a lot of the sediment got trapped behind these dams. So we can associate those two things. But they're trying to reclaim some of these areas and get rid of all the sediment. And in this one particular area, bulldozers began to remove 22,000 tons of this legacy sediment along 4 square kilometers of this particular valley. Who knows how many tons of this legacy sediment is spread throughout the eastern United States. And it just ties into everything that I've been saying, and I'm going to build upon this, but just wild stuff. And I think there was an event, and I think it traces to an early industrial period as well. And even though in the case of the UK, they're the colonizers in a lot of cases, but I think there are sites where they experienced this event as well, and they're partially buried. And, in Australia, timing is all condensed into the 1800s with regards to Australia. But there's this early period in Australia, you have this early colonial period, so it's typically 1820 to 1850, 1860, but it's also buried, and you have these buried blocks of Melbourne, and they find, all these different sites that are partially buried, and I think it might all be related, but that's just kind of my view. It's just really interesting stuff. Who knows how many tons of sediment have been deposited, and it's associated with the activities of the early colonial period in the United States. And I've been saying that for a while with a lot of sites. They're buried, and maybe it was caused by something that is not in the history book. So just wanted to mention this. I'll be building off these ideas, I'm sure, in future videos, but just exciting stuff. So I think I'll leave it here for today. Once again, I do want to give a big shout out to all my patrons. Really appreciate the support and the help. So thank you very much. So until next time, take care. Bye.